Well, bit of an odd question in some ways, but it can be a really important one. What colour is your roof? If you bought your home and it wasn't a new build, the chances are that you probably didn't really have much of a choice, or if you're renting, again, not a whole lot of choice there. If you're in an older house and it's tiled, they generally tend to be things like terracotta, but particularly for new builds, and I'm sure you've noticed this, there are a lot of dark black tiled roofs, and new research has quantified how much more it can cost you to have a dark roof when it comes to things like cooling costs. Sebastian Pfautsch is Professor for Urban Management at Western Sydney University and has been looking this and joins us this afternoon. Professor, thank you for your time.
Good afternoon.
So you've done the sums, and there is a kind of a measurable dollar amount of how much it can cost to have a darkly coloured roof.
Indeed. And when you think about the lifetime of your home, 30, maybe 50, maybe 60 years, that can amass to a substantial amount of money. So for Sydney, we calculated $700 or just about $700 that you would save every year. So track that forward for, a few decades, that comes together as a good sum.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't be spending. Yeah.
And so how did you arrive at that figure?
We looked at the comparison of dark roofs and light-coloured roofs, and I should say, the colleagues from New South Wales, or the University of New South Wales, did a huge modelling study for every capital city, where they compared the light-coloured and the dark-coloured roofs. I do a lot of environmental and empirical measurements. So I measured the roof surface temperatures and roof cavity temperatures, and we came together and we really said, well, in times where everyone's doing it tough, we need to really put a dollar value on this. And we used average household annual electricity use, for this instance, Sydney or New South Wales, which is provided through the energy information that you can get on the web. And then we look at the modelling outputs from their study and found that in Sydney, it's about 38% that you would save by having a light-coloured roof. So this is cooling energy that you need for your home because it's hotter.
Yeah.
And so simply then calculated what 38% of your annual average is and came to $697.
Wow. So would it be different in different parts of Australia depending on, I guess, things like how much sunlight they receive during the hotter months?
Yes, that's right. And also we shall not forget that there could be also a heating penalty in winter. And this is, for example, where we found that darker roofs for Hobart actually work fine because they give you more warmth, where you need less energy in winter to warm your home, then you have to deal with cooling in summer. So if you are in Hobart or anywhere in Tassie, it's probably absolutely fine to have a dark roof. But for any other place in continental Australia, mainland Australia, then it's, definitely costing you money.
Right, because already Baz has been in touch on the text line wondering about winter. Wouldn't it be beneficial for heating in winter? But is I guess you look at how hot and how long summer is versus how
Correct.
cold and how long winter is?
Correct. And we look at those hours where you would need or likely need air conditioning to either warm or cool. So that's what we call the cooling or the heating penalty.
Okay. And is it as simple? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more complexity to it, but is it as simple in layman's terms that the darker colours, they kind of trap and hold the heat, and that's where this can become the challenge?
Correct. It's simple physics, really. It's all about thermal mass and the reflectivity of a surface and the material that it's made of. So in those new suburbs, you mentioned already in the opening sentences that you have a lot of terracotta tiles or cement tiles. We also see a lot of ColourBond metal roofs going in now in these newer developments. So just the difference between, let's say, a dark tiled roof and a dark metal roof can be quite substantial because the dark roof from tiles has a greater thermal mass. And that means it stores solar energy for longer and would re-radiate it as sensible heat and therefore for warmer temperatures in your roof cavity. So you see that you would have a home that cools down slower in the evening when the heat is going down outside. It stays hot in the inside.
Is there a cumulative effect here too, where if you have a lot of houses next to each other or townhouses or units next to each other that all have a dark coloured roof, or does that does it kind of become bigger than the sum of its parts, or does that not really play out?
It does indeed. So there's a cumulative effect when you look at those new settlements or housing estates where you have many dark roofs. They do become hotter. So again, when you calculate what kind of cooling would you get looking at cool roofs at a larger scale, where every roof becomes a more reflective roof, you can see summer temperatures, peak air temperatures going down 2 to 3 degrees. So it's quite substantial. It also means around your home, the microclimate is cooler, and therefore your air intake is cooler for your air conditioning system if you use it, which again means you're not cooling down hot air, but you're cooling down less hot air, which means you need less electricity again. So it has cumulative effect in that respect as well.
We've got a question on the text line from Tony from Broadview wondering what role does insulation play here? If you had a house that was really well insulated, would that negate some of these effects and kind of make the colour of the roof less important?
Again, you can look at the individual house. Yes, it will absolutely make a huge difference if you insulate well and not just sarking a little bit of a tin foil on your roof, but you really put bats into the roof space, so you stop the heat entering through the ceiling. But when you think about it collectively, again, the darker roofs will make your neighborhoods hotter. So there is, yes, of course, with insulation, a massive effect on your individual home, but you still have the problem of urban overheating and accelerated heat during summer from having a black roof.
It is 9 to 3 on ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill. We're talking about this research that's been done into how much of a difference having a dark coloured roof can mean financially. Sebastian Pfautsch is with us, Professor of Urban Management at Western Sydney University. And another question through on the text line, this is from Andrew from Hope Valley, says we've got solar panels on most of the north side, so those roof tiles don't see direct sun. I'm not sure that a lighter colour would do much in my particular case. I will repaint it next year when I've got some time. But what about just covering things in solar? Is that the future?
So again, we've got research out there that says when you have your solar panels on dark roofs, they become less efficient compared you put them onto light-colored roofs. And that is because these PV panels are temperature dependent in their efficiency. So if you have a hot day on a hot roof, you produce less electricity because your PV panels are less effective in transforming that solar energy because they are hotter. So if you put them on a light-colored roof, they become more effective. That also means if you look at peak energy use, let's say during a heat wave, you are less likely to cause, and you guys in South Australia had massive blackouts, you cause less strain on the electricity system because you're still producing more electricity with your solar panels on the light-colored roofs, which reduces the strain and therefore the risk for blackouts. So there are also some follow-on effects when you think about this at scale.
Alan from Linton's on the phone. Alan, good afternoon to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Nikolai, Sebastian. You can pay a lot of money for paints containing little glass beads, which are claims to reflect a lot more than simply a good quality, light-coloured external paint. Any thoughts on them?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Alan. So whether or not these fancy reflective paints make a difference. Do you know about that, Sebastian Pfautsch?
Yes, we do look into even ceramic coatings, and some of them perform really well because you're looking into the infrared spectrum of light that you want to reflect. So not so much the visible light, but the infrared light, because that's the wavelength that really heats up materials, that makes them hotter. So there's some very effective products that, of course, come with a price. I do need to say, when you are building a new house, a lighter colored roof is exactly the same price as a darker colored one. So there's no price penalty, if you want to call it that, when you want to put a lighter colored roof on it. I have to say, probably not a white roof if you are living in a suburb that has kind of an undulating landscape, because there still is the issue of glare. And with new materials, we are trying to overcome also the glare. And these materials are called supercool materials, which even lower the surface temperature below ambient of these materials. So there are just ongoing experiments at the moment here in Western Sydney and also in Central Australia, where we get high energy loads from the sun, where it's really good to test these materials and then, of course, get into the industrial applications to produce them at scale.
Do you think the dark colouring that we're seeing, particularly on new builds, is it just a trend? Is it just a kind of marketing thing? It's kind of seen as cool at the moment, and maybe in, no pun intended, in 5 or 10 years' time, that'll change again? Is it just a trend that we're seeing, do you think?
There are different things at play. Yes, it is just fashionable, chic.
Yep.
When you think of, fashion and accessoires, then black is always chic and exquisite. So there is a little bit of that. There's also still quite a lack of education for the people that build these homes, because the homeowners, not the builders, because the conversation, once they go to one of these demonstration villages, very rarely is about heat and how your house performs in hot weather. It's much more about your kitchen and colors and the tiles in the bathroom and all of those kind of questions.
Right.
In the end, you get a package, and that package contains a dark roof. You don't even think much about it, because the heat issue in those conversations isn't really brought up. And that means there's also really a severe lack of knowledge on the homeowner's side, because they could just say, well, hang on a minute, I like the package, but I like to have a lighter colored roof. Also, there's psychology behind this, where you go to these new housing estates and you see that every house has a dark roof, and you just think, well, I don't want to stick out. I just want to blend in. And therefore, it's the logical choice. I will go dark. So different layers. And then, of course, this is where South Australia is now the trailblazer. The planning and housing minister of your state was the first who simply banned it from a state level for a development in the north of Adelaide, where he said, we are not putting dark roofs in here, we are putting light-coloured roofs in there. So there's also a political dimension to this, where we could have regulation, simply saying we are in warmer climate now, it will be even warmer in the future, we're looking at 60 years lifetime of a home. Let's be smart and just build them according to those conditions that we're anticipating, and not climate from the past, which is a problem in the National Construction Code, where they use climate that's not really reflecting the current conditions and where we're heading. So it's a problem that is also systemic in building a compliant building, but then building it to standards and regulations that are based on outdated climate information. So it's complex, as you said.
There's a lot to it. No, well, Daniela in Plimpton's on the line too. Daniela, good afternoon.
Hi.
What did you want to mention?
Okay, I've got cement terracotta tiles on my roof, and my partner has pressure cleaned them, so now the colour is a lot lighter. He also has one of those laser thermometers, and he said it's 8 to 10 degrees cooler, because he tested both patches as he was doing it.
Wow.
And also regarding the ceiling cavity, I've got a solar whirlybird, which is equivalent to 20 of the manual ones, and they say that reduces the inside temperature, that's inside the ceiling, the roof, by 20 degrees, and inside the house by around 5 degrees.
Okay, Daniela, thank you. And that's another point that Anne was asking as well, using the very scientific term, but I know exactly what she means, and I'd use the same thing myself. The whirly things that we put on our roofs, do they expel hot air? Are they a good idea for cooling the roof space?
Absolutely. It's those kind of retrofits that make sense. And they're also, of course, cheaper than repainting or even rebuilding your roof to avoid the heat. So there are measures that can be used that do make a difference. And the whirlybirds, yes, the extractors, they do quite a good job. Again, insulation, of course, is the next one to look at. And then, if you can, changing the color by either painting or replacing. There is a certain lifetime of your roof anyway. So at some point, most buildings will need a new roof. Then it's time to address that for your already existing building stock.
It's been a really interesting discussion, Sebastian. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
That's Sebastian Pfautsch, Professor for Urban Management at Western Sydney University. A couple more of your texts coming through on this as well. One person says, we've got friends who built a house in Mitcham. The council compelled them to have a dark roof to mitigate glare to neighbours, even though they had a full gull-wing roof and there weren't reflective surfaces. Another person saying that they chose the fourth lightest colour they could get and barely use air conditioning in summer. That was for Colour Bond. They have that tool online, apparently. John says, we live in the hills. We built our house to be warm. Insulation in the roof and the exterior walls. And we can close off the ones that we don't use. And green galvanised roof works for us.